Himina Nkateko, Ngwana wa Chabuyo na Kazamula, Kazamula wa Muhlaba, Muhlaba wa Jim, Jim wa Stota, Stota wa Nkanyabane, Nkanyabane wa Bushani, Bushani wa Choki, Choki wa Ngunola, Ngunola wa Masingi. Hena aka hena he tinzuba leto ja madzovo. Aye. Greetings, colleagues. I am so honored to be here. You know, when there is an occasion that you're supposed to show up for, it's as if you're in that video game where you have to pass certain challenges in order to earn the prize. And for me, the prize was being able to show up fully. And I feel like there were all of these challenges in the way, but as soon as one thing was resolved, I knew that I'm one step closer to being here. So I'm so honored to be in front of you. And I am so grateful that each of you, I know that the reality I spoke of does not just apply to me, that each of you had to go through considerable challenges in order to be able to be here. And I'm really grateful that you overcame each and every one of those. I'm very happy to see you this evening. I'd like to begin with an excerpt from my work in progress, which is titled Semantics of Living. So this is a poem titled Anatomy. I trudge along the mortuary hall, my mentor's words echoing through my psyche as formaldehyde assaults my nostrils. Vicks skulks out from my scrub's leg pocket. Camphor, menthol, eucalyptus. Brief respite from the inexorable smell of flesh. This day has declared me defeated, unfit to survive the rigor of the field that we come to by forceps or by fate. The field that converts cum laude to Hail Mary without grace. The field that offers me a body in exchange for my name inscribed on a plaque. Geriatrics was light work in comparison to this. Obstetrics was doable if you set aside the incessant bleeding. Forensic pathology was a harbinger, the baptist to my reign of ruin and redemption. But this, scalpels wielded to the sound of corpses breaking, a clavichord choir of sternums cracking, to uncage the heart of man, the conductor of a once clamorous orchestra, now stilled for eternity. I retrieve the blade from my dissection kit. One incision contributes one mark. And nightly I will walk these halls again, again, again. Had I known the cost, I would have sprinted with my soul. That piece was written in honor of all of the unclaimed, unidentified, and unnamed bodies in institutional dissection halls. It is a fact that the unclaimed bodies which are used for cadaveric dissection in medical training programs are disproportionately those of poor, marginalized, and Black people, without the knowledge or consent of their families. This acquisition of bodies is legal under the National Health Act of 2003. However, legality does not equal morality. And it is in this vein that I pose a question. Is the acquisition and dissection of unclaimed bodies a second assault on those who have already suffered the indignities of anti-Black racial violence in their lifetime? In order to answer that question, I would like us to examine In the Wake on Blackness and Being, the seminal work of Christina Sharp, published in 2016 by Duke University Press. In this book, Sharp introduces wake work, or being in the wake, as the processes involved when we plot, map, and reflect on the archives of everyday Black life and Black death. She asks, in the midst of so much death and the fact of Black life as proximate to death, how do we attend to physical, social, and figurative death, and also to the largeness that is Black life? Black life that is insisted from death. I believe that we are called to our own version of wake work, because being in the wake of apartheid means that we are uniquely positioned to examine its limbs, that we are awake to the contents of its uncaged heart, and that we continue to keep watch over the body of our collective consciousness. We are called to the proverbial dissection hall so that we can bear witness and see in whose hand the blade lies. Let us also examine the racial contract by the late Charles W. Mills, published in 1997 by Cornell University Press. In this book, Mills argues that the racial contract was never a true contract because the absence of consent negated its validity. In an article titled Understanding Apartheid South Africa Through the Racial Contract, published in 2015 by the International Journal of Asian Social Sciences, the scholars Mavis Mhlauli, Enid Salani, and Rosina Mukotedi from the University of Botswana quoted Mills as follows: if the racial contract creates its signatories, meaning those who are party to the contract, by constructing them as white persons, then it also makes its victims, who are the objects of the contract, into the non-white sub-persons that it specifies. Mhlauli, Salani, and Mukotedi further assert that the contract was voided at its onset because white people, who are referred to as humans or persons, never had a legitimate agreement with the non-whites, who, in the words of Mills, were denied the status of being human, marked by the exploitation of their bodies, their land, and their resources, and the denial of equal social, economic opportunities to them. So if we juxtapose the orthography of the wake, which is the key concept in this book, In the Wake, on Blackness and Being by Christina Sharp, with the non-consensual nature of the racial contract, which is underpinned by white supremacy, which Mills refers to as a deliberate political system, then I believe that we can reasonably assume that systems that oppress Black life predict and complicate Black death. And so I would like to expand on my question as follows. If the acquisition and dissection of unclaimed bodies is a second assault on those who have already suffered the indignities of anti-Black racial violence in their lifetimes, is it possible that the existence of bodies acquired by other means, including body donor programs, create a hierarchy within the dissection hall based on the ability to consent, whether by choice or by proxy, a privilege which is not accessible to the unclaimed, unidentified, and unnamed? Where that question comes from is, while I was doing my research for this, I found out that the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Cape Town has cadaver memorialization. Am I saying it right? They memorialize the cadavers. And there was something that touched me when I saw that, because they invited the families of the body donors. And I was thinking about all of the people who died and their families had no idea where they were, and how it is so difficult to pay tribute to them in the same way, because I feel as if their space in there is so different. At the University of Pretoria, prior to dissection, we had a priest come in and explain to us what it means that you are now working with and from the body of someone who might not have been able to agree to this. And there was something very painful about that entire 7 weeks that we were dissecting, because I had to then contend with the fact that if this person were alive, this is possibly not what they would have wanted. So as we reflect on the question that I posed before I digressed, I'd like to share another poem from my work in progress. This one is titled, A Firefly at the Communion Table. I acknowledge that I am no martyr. I falter through the Our Father. I remember well the cracked cadaver that I dissected. The man had a name once, and then only a tag on his foot, barcoded property of the institution. I acknowledge that I am no hero. I threaten the throat of memory with this admission. I nearly died in medical school. I had a name then too, and then only debt and illness, labeled property of the institution. I acknowledge that I am no saint. I give the kisses. I take the silver. I flutter for a chance at living, a firefly at the communion table. And so we are gathered here at the proverbial communion table in the wake of apartheid, but also in the wake of the commemoration of Freedom Day, which was yesterday. And I'm reminded of the words of Professor Lwazi Lushaba, who was at the previous iteration of this seminar in April of 2024. And he said the following: the 27th of April is not Freedom Day, it is Independence Day. But because the category that we use to think about our history is given to us, then we are left with a misrepresentation of our own lived experience. If you can control the categories with which people think about history, then you can leave them uncertain of when they became independent. So that really stayed with me. And it brings me to my third question. Is it possible that the legality of the act of acquiring unclaimed bodies for use in dissection halls is a remnant of slavery? In 2023, an article titled "From Grave Robbing to Giving Your Body to Science, a Short History of Where Medical Schools Get Their Cadavers." Two medical historians, Sarah Lawrence and Sarah Ladera, from the University of Tennessee and the University of Wisconsin-Madison, respectively, wrote that the very first anatomy law was passed in 1831, making the bodies of poor people available for dissection. This legislation came about in the wake of body trafficking controversy, in which grave robbers were basically stealing bodies and then selling them to institutions that need them. And they refer to themselves as resurrectionists. In an article titled "In Need of Cadavers, 19th Century Medical Students Raided Graves," published in 2018 in Smithsonian Magazine, Antero Pietila wrote the following: "This pillaging of bodies, although technically a misdemeanor, was seldom prosecuted. Politicians protected it in the name of common good, and the police looked the other way. Lawyers argued that because the previous occupant had vacated the body, its citizenship was in doubt. Its ownership was in doubt. So why bother? There was no victim after all. In South Africa, our land, where we live and strive for freedom, the National Health Act of 2003 states the following: if a body has not, within 30 days after the death of the deceased, been buried, it shall be at the disposal of the officer in whose area the body is located. The health officer may, on receipt of a written notice, hand the body over to a specific institution situated in the area of the health officer. The person in charge of an institution in which a body has been handed over shall keep and preserve that body for a period of no longer than 14 days before it may be used. Any tissue of such a body may be removed and preserved separately. And we have to remember that this is a human being that is being spoken about. The body was someone's relative. In September of 2024, the Department of Health, the South African National Department of Health, had a meeting with the Portfolio Committee where they were responding to the Health Market Inquiry Report on the status of unclaimed bodies in state mortuaries. The meeting so there was a session in which all of the facts were being presented. The fact that there are too many unclaimed bodies, and there are a lot of unclaimed bodies of people who are not South African citizens. So to be frank, the bodies, the cadavers that we find in our medical school dissection programs are usually the bodies of people who died on the street. No one knows who this person is. There's no way of tracking down the family. And so according to the law, according to the Health Act, then they can be used. And I find it really, really sad, because there's something about medicine that depersonalizes things. Everyone becomes a number. Everyone is just hospital number, whoever, bed number, whoever. And you forget that that's a human being. And even after they've passed away, that is a human being. So within this meeting, it was acknowledged that this acquisition of unclaimed bodies is taboo within traditional African culture. It is taboo, and there was no system in place to track the bodies of deceased people. And so they justified the fact that there are a certain number of days that you can keep a body. And there are a certain number of days that you can store a body before you start to use it. And that's usually what happens, is even if some people come and look for the relative a year later, 2 years later, by then it's too late. And so the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee then made different recommendations, one of them calling for collaboration across various sectors, including the police department, the justice department, and the home affairs department. And these recommendations were that there should be more comprehensive solutions to the number of bodies that are currently in dissection halls, how to deal with the systemic issues surrounding unclaimed bodies. And so I'd like to leave you with one last question. In light of all that we have spoken about, to whom does your body belong? Thank you.